In this video, we'll set up our solar system with the sun and a few planetary bodies. Our objective will be to create the game objects that make up the sun, the earth, and the moon, and to modify their transforms to set their position in three-dimensional space and their respective scale. Okay, here I am in Unity. I've got my project basically set up with my assets imported. So the first thing that I'm going to do is basically create my sun. So to do that, of course, you could use an external modeling program and model it and then import it, just like we imported the other assets. But there are some basic 3D primitives that you can create directly in Unity. So under Game Object, you can go down where it says 3D Object, and of course our sun is just a sphere. So we're going to go ahead and create a sphere. And you can see, I could just use the scroll wheel to zoom in here a little bit. We have created a sphere. In our hierarchy, of course, we can see the sphere as well. The game object is called sphere. If I click on that and move my mouse down a little bit, I can rename this. I'm going to name it sun. As you're building projects, it's always very important to name your game objects in a logical fashion, because at times you'll literally have hundreds and thousands of game objects in your hierarchy. So you want to give them good logical names so you can find them. You don't want Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3, because then you just have chaos. So we've got our sun here. It is positioned. I can look over here at the transform component for the game object. You can see it's positioned right at the origin, 0, 0, 0, rotation 0, 0, 0, scale 1, 1, 1. Okay. If I move this, I can grab the little gizmo, move it off. You can see once again that it moves in the X direction as I move that gizmo. If I grab the Z, I can move it in the Z direction. And the Y, I can move it in the Y direction. And you can see it down there in the game view as well, moving, as I'm moving it. But I do want to position it right at the origin of the world. That'll be sort of the center point. The anchor of our solar system is at 0, 0, 0. So let me go ahead and just manually enter 0, 0, 0 in the transform component and get my sun right there in the middle. As you're moving around, once again, I could use the Option key and left click, and I can use the scroll wheel and with the Option move around and that sort of thing. Whenever you're moving around here, once again, remember you can always select the game object and tap the F key, and the scene view will immediately snap back to that game object. So that's a quick way, to switch around. So let's go ahead and create the Earth now. So we're going to do the same process. I'll select Game Object, 3D Object, and create another sphere. It's essentially going to create it right on top of, it doesn't look like it did anything, but it actually created it right on top. If I move it off here a little bit, you can see now we've got two spheres. And once again, I want to rename this right away. So it's got a logical name. You can rename it right there in the hierarchy, or, with the game object selected. Over here in the inspector, you can also rename it right here. So I'll go ahead and name it Earth. For this game object, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So this isn't going to be a scale model by any means of the actual solar system. This is much like the little model that you might have in a science or a physics class, growing up with the, little solid balls on arms that spin around. So, I'm going to make this just for purpose of display about half the size of the sun. So, there's sort of two ways of doing this. You can actually use the scale tool, which is up here. And, if I grab these little gizmos, I can scale it in any one of the three directions. Let me go ahead and undo that. Or I can, click the middle to scale from there, and you can see it modifies all three at the same time. So if if you're a very visual person and just want to do it visually, you can do it that way. You can also, of course, go over to the transform component and enter things. I'm going to be, somewhat precise, so I'm going to say 0.5 in all three axes, so X, Y, and Z. So it's roughly, or it's exactly 50% of the size of the sun in this model. Now I need to position it. So, I could manually, once again, if I go back to the move tool, so we looked at the scale tool, the move tool is the default, which is these 4 arrows. And, I can kind of move it out, just in the X direction as an example. Or I can move it wherever I want. But for purposes of example, once again, I'm going to be precise. So over here in the transform, I'm going to move it out 2 meters from the center of the world in the X direction. And leave it right at Y0 and Z0. Once again, at any point, we can kind of move our camera around to kind of see what we're doing. We could always, use the little gizmo here at the top to quickly snap. So if I click here, it does, a sort of a straight-on shot. It says from the back, and I could rotate around the left side, the front, the right side. I can do a top-down view. So now I'm looking top-down at the world. Or if you click back in the middle, it'll go back to perspective view, or I can just, manually drag to do that. Okay, so I can see both the sun and the earth at the same time. And of course, this is not affecting my camera. My game camera always is the same here. We'll actually change the game camera here in a moment. So we're going to create one more planetary body. We're going to create the moon that will eventually orbit around the Earth. We could do the same process, but just to show a different technique. Since I know it's going to be a sphere and it's going to be very similar to the Earth, I'm going to just select the Earth and go under Edit, Duplicate, or you could always use the shortcuts on the Mac. Here it's Command D. It's probably Control D on Windows. So I'll go ahead and duplicate that. You can see it made another Earth. Called it Earth 1. Immediately I'm going to rename that so it's not confusing, and I'll call it the moon. Once again, it's right on top of the Earth, so it essentially looks like one sphere now, but I can drag it out just to see that it is different. Once again, I want to change the size. This is going to be about 10% of the normal size, so we can do 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 in all 3 directions, so it maintains as a sphere. And once again, we need to position it. We can do this by hand, let's say 1.5, and maybe we'll place the Earth, somewhat between the sun, 1.5 meters out from 0, 0, 0, and the Earth, I think, was at 2 meters out from 0, 0, 0. So the last thing I want to do is play with my camera a little bit. The camera, if I select, we got that for free with the untitled scene. I can go ahead and click the F, and you can see that it's represented as a little gizmo, a little icon that represents the camera here, because we don't visually see it, in the game, but we can see it with that little gizmo in the scene, so we know where it's at. The camera right now is positioned at 0, 1 meter high, and -10. So, I want to basically have it right on the same plane as rest of the world. So, I'm going to move it down 1 meter, so back down to 0. And, it's a little bit far away right now at -10 meters from the origin. So I'm going to put it at -3. And you can see my game view immediately changed. It's a lot closer in with the sun right at the middle, then the moon, and then the Earth. We'll leave the camera at 0, 0, 0 rotation and just a regular scale. So the last thing I'm going to do is actually save my scene because you never know when computers might crash. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, Save Scene. And it's going to ask us to name that scene. Why don't we just call it Solar System? Seems like a logical name. It's going to save it naturally into the assets folder of the project, so you usually don't have to necessarily change this, at least when you're initially saving the scene. So let me click Save. You can see it created a new file in my project called Solar System. It placed it at the top level. For a small project, that's fine. If you have a complex project, I do highly recommend organizing your project's folder, your assets folder in a very logical fashion. So you can see we've got scripts, sounds, and textures. I'm going to go ahead and click the little Create drop-down and create a new folder. And I'm going to name this Scenes as a folder to keep my scenes. And I could go ahead and drag and drop my solar system scene into that folder. So now within that folder, I've got the solar system. So, if ultimately we build many different scenes in our project, we would, of course, save those all in the scenes folder. In the next video, we'll get our solar system moving through the use of behaviors attached to the planetary game objects.